Lauren Takata, who you've met on other podcasts, used to work alongside me to help my clients move from survival mode to reproductive mode. I called her in the group the functional medicine expert that would do the intakes with my clients and kind of discover their fertility mystery. Well, a few months ago, she decided to leave fertility, her role as being a functional medicine expert in fertility, to study mold toxicity because of what her family and her went through. Ever since she told me that, and again, I want to say it was about 6 months ago, I keep on hearing about mold toxicity and what havoc it wreaks on bodies and fertility. So even my new functional medicine expert in the group, her name is Becca Kyle, when I see her intake forms for my clients and I see what they need to do and recommendations, mold keeps on popping up with her as well. So I finally said, Lauren, because of your training, can you come in and teach my audience about mold toxicity? Because if it keeps on popping up, it means it's everywhere, and it is. So this podcast is really for everybody, no matter if you're trying to get pregnant or not. I want you to share this podcast. I have shared this information with my family. We've discovered mold toxicity within my family and an extended family, and it just couldn't be more important to help us avoid sickness and diseases and infertility as we move forward, and issues for our children. So important. All right, now for the formal introduction of Lauren Takata. Lauren Takata is a board-certified physician assistant with 16 years of clinical experience who completed additional certification and training with the Institute of Functional Medicine. That's ifm.org, and that's the place she always recommends that you check out if you're looking for somebody. After having firsthand experience of how integrative medicine, because remember, she was a physician assistant, was able to find the why behind the health issues of her family, she shifted her focus on personalized lifestyle medicine. Lauren has a keen curiosity for environmental toxins, nutrient deficiencies, gut health and stress, and how they disrupt the health of an individual. She has a special interest in treating eczemas, allergies, gut issues, and mold illness. She enjoys bridging the gap between allopathic and holistic medicine and focuses on the body's innate ability to heal from within. And outside of work, Lauren enjoys spending time with her friends, family, and especially her husband and 4 daughters. She loves the mountains, hiking, and living a healthy lifestyle. All right, please meet again, Lauren Takata. Well, hello, Lauren. I'm so excited that we are doing this because it was really you that brought the idea of mold toxicity into just my life, not just an awareness of it. And since then, oh my gosh, that's all I hear about, right? Well, I also work with a lot of functional medicine experts, but it's literally all I hear about. So I cannot wait for you to teach us about this really important toxicity and what it's doing. How do we know we have it? How to avoid that, all of that good stuff. So why don't you just get started with why you left being a functional medicine expert for fertility and moved into training about mold toxicity.
Sure. It's so fun to be here and see you again, because working with you is always so much fun. I really like all spaces functional medicine. I mean, optimizing our health is fun, and it's, it always hits home because it involves us, it involves your kids, it involves your family, your parents, you name it. And working with women struggling with fertility and being able to bring them, either through the treatments well or get them out of the treatment and they get pregnant naturally was just so rewarding and so much fun. And it really comes down to, diet, lifestyle, where's inflammation coming from, what's your gut health, what's your past trauma, what toxins you're exposed to, so on and so forth. And really diving into the kind of that biohacking side for myself and for patients was pretty eye-opening, because understanding what all these things do to the system was something you don't learn on the medical side, and help bring medicine all together But during this process, I have four young girls, ages 3, 5, 7, 9, so a bunch of little ones, 2 of which were really, really sick since birth. And I mean, so uncomfortable in their own skin, rash head to toe, no sleep, really severe eczema, really severe food allergies to a point where our family still cannot go to a restaurant because it's too unsafe. So it's a scary existence, and trying to figure out what was wrong with them took years of studying the functional medicine, optimizing their gut, giving them supplements, and these poor kids just got worse and worse and worse. Long story short, I ran into a wonderful provider, and he took one look at her and said, "Oh, has to be mold and possibly Lyme, but if it's Lyme, then it's mold." And I'm like, "There's just no way we have mold, right?" And so, we end up finding a significant amount of mold in our kitchen behind the refrigerator, and tested the kids. The kids had a lot of mold, and we've gone through that treatment. And the kids they're not 100%, but I would say they're 90%. But they sleep through the night. The eczema's gone. We're working on gut health. The food allergies are slowly improving. So life is less scary. They're happy. They look good. They're wearing shorts for the first time in 8 years. Things like that. So it's been really rewarding. And I, as you can imagine, went down that mold rabbit hole and have found more the environmental toxin and how it relates to our health, probably the most interesting area. And we live in a toxic soup. So I now work with kids and families that are struggling with issues as ADHD, autism, depression, all these things that young kids are dealing with that most of us only heard maybe one person in the high school that had a peanut allergy, right? And now it's just everywhere.
Right.
But working with these kids, and most of the time it's mold. And so it's a lot more prevalent than I think people even understand. And a lot of people don't want to look because you don't necessarily want to know, because when you find mold, it is a very long, expensive process, and it's daunting because it's also hard to find someone who knows how to treat it. But that's the space I'm in. And, when I work with these families with kids with autism or kids with really, really severe ADHD and those type of things, a lot of times you do look at mom's health, and mom has a history of, gut issues and autoimmunity and thyroid this, and, I get migraines all the time, or I struggled with fertility. That it's, what was going on with mom, and how did that affect this kid, or set them up to be more predisposed to being affected by mold, or more predisposed to being affected by the toxins because they already had a toxin load. And so it's all very interesting. So it's fun to work with the moms and women trying to get pregnant, because it is really important to kind of optimize our health to not only improve fertility, which is our goal, but also once pregnant, you just have a healthy baby, right?
Okay, yeah. And so you mentioned like a lot of different symptoms, right? From your kids weren't sleeping to a bunch of rashes and eczemas to I don't know, is ADHD a symptom of mold toxicity? Or
the mold is one of those things that it generally wreaks havoc on the system more than anything else. And how it does it really is it can colonize the gut, it can colonize the sinuses. And with that, a lot of gut disruption. We all know that gut health is really important, and leaky gut and systemic inflammation. I'm sure you talk of that kind of thing. This is one of the biggest disruptors we have. And so when the gut's not doing well, the system doesn't do well. And what we see is a lot of neuroinflammation. So you get all of the neuropsychiatric issues with kids. Adults, we see a lot of brain fog, a lot of anxiety. Wow, ever since I moved in this house, I'm really struggling with anxiety. And so out of the 4 kids, 2 of them had really bad anxiety and OCD and those type of symptoms, which I didn't even really put 2 and 2 together. And still going down the whole rabbit hole of this while I was focusing on the eczema, on the food allergies, and the gut health, because that was much more apparent, right?
Right.
But it affects everybody differently. But the neuro side is really probably most common. The nervous system gets hit quickly with inflammation.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, it affects your gut, but then the gut causes the neuro and all those other symptoms. Is that correct?
Right. So if your gut, mold will kind of colonize. Mold produces toxins and mycospores and different things along those lines. So if the immune system's fighting it, it fights back. And the toxins within our bloodstream essentially going to make us toxic in that front. But when it disrupts the gut, it causes a dysbiosis, which is just, an imbalance of the good and the bad bacteria that live within us. And once there's more bad than there's good, they start to fight each other and produce what we call endotoxins. So it's the mycotoxins in the bloodstream. It's the endotoxins, which comes from the bacteria. It's, food particles, which produce the food allergies and sensitivity. Everything starts to seep into the bloodstream through this leaky gut that shouldn't be there, which then affects the nervous system, and it affects, the immune system is probably one of the biggest, what gets affected the most. Because if you think about, in my past, I did kidney transplant and liver transplant in New York for a couple of years. And we gave a drug to these patients when they received an organ, and that drug is called cyclosporin. So it calms your immune system down so that you don't fight the new organ. Cyclosporin comes from mold. It's a mold toxin. And so you can see that it really does hinder immune function. So kids that are sick with earaches all the time, or the kids that are just never get better, you got to question what's the reason for that, because that's not normal, right? We normalize a lot of things, don't we?
Yeah.
But a lot of that stuff's not normal.
Okay, and so how do you find out if you have mold toxicity?
The tests aren't perfect, right? Because it's not necessarily conventional medicine based. So they're not standardized tests, but there's a urine mycotox test that measures mycotoxins within our urine. So when we're exposed to mold, we excrete the toxins through the urine just as we detox, right? We detox through urine, we detox through feces, but the urine catches it, and you can see elevated levels in the urine of these mold toxins. And it actually shows what type of toxins, so you know what kind of mold you're exposed to. Obviously, if you eat mold in your food, which can occur on, berries, and there's mold in our food everywhere, that can bump up those levels a little bit, but it shouldn't bump it up crazy, right?
Right.
And then to add to, a lot of times we'll do the urine test initially. There's a blood test that shows the kind of immune reactivity to mold. So if your immune system is going crazy for this mold and that mold, you kind of wonder, where is it in your environment, and why are you exposed to it so much so that your immune system now is producing antibodies against the mold.
And did you do both with your family?
Yeah, we did both on everybody. Levels were pretty high on everybody.
Right. But so after you did the urine test, what was the benefit, or did you learn anything differently about with the immune reactivity with the blood test?
I think it's confirmation of how much is the mold exposure or colonization really tripping up the system. For us, we did the urine, we had moved out, we remediated the home, we moved back in, and about 6 months later, I did the immune reactivity test. I wanted to see if just moving out and moving back in, just being out of the environment, the kids came back to normal. But sadly, they were colonized, so it didn't matter what environment we were in. It was essentially their bodies became that wet building. The mold starts to grow in the GI tract and the sinuses and so on. So then treatment was essentially necessary.
Okay. And so what and did your husband and you have the mold also?
We focused on the kids because that's what moms do, right? I had a lot of symptoms. I'm generally healthy, right? I eat healthy. I live in a certain way. I don't have any health issues, but I had a lot of waking up feeling really hungover a couple days a week after not drinking, a lot of brain fog, a little bit of anxiety, but I also wasn't sleeping. I had kids that didn't sleep for years. And so chalked it up to that, or I've been pregnant, 4 times, like I'm just depleted and it's normal. So even about 6 months ago, I ran the immune reactivity on myself alongside Dr. Andrew Campbell. He's a more conventional medical specialist that treats mold. He's one of the top in the country. And I took his test, and my levels were very high of the toxins, and and little tidbits. For example, certain toxins actually will bind and reduce testosterone levels. And for myself, I've had 0 testosterone for as many years as I can remember. No one really understands why there's none. I mean, having low levels is pretty normal for people, but no testosterone at all in the system. And I did everything I could to boost that up, and it never lifted. So I'm curious to see if the testosterone comes back after, treating the mold, but we'll see more.
So that's an interesting symptom. No, I mean, it's just like, it seems to affect like everything.
It does, because inflammation is what, when we think about infertility, I mean, fertility issues is so common, and disease is so common now. And the driving factor is inflammation. And where does the inflammation come from? Diet, lifestyle, lack of sleep, stress, and, processed foods, sugar. So that's something we're all starting to learn of. Lifestyle really does affect our ability to do anything, really, but fertility being a big barometer of our health. Mold being a huge driver of that really pushes all of that forward, right? So if you're someone and you're like, I eat really well, I sleep really well, what gives? Why am I still struggling with this, that, or the third? Why do I have so much anxiety when I'm, living this clean lifestyle? It's something to really look into. And a lot of times, a lot of clients of mine, I live in a brand new house. Oh, my house was perfectly clean. We've never had any water damage. I mean, ours included. I would have never thought we had any water damage, right? And so it's sneaky, because it can be behind walls and still affect the air quality of the home, which you would think it's in a wall cavity and you don't see it. There's just no way it's making a kid sick in the bedroom down the way, But you start to learn that the house is a whole breathing system, where you have the HVAC and you turn the heat on in the winter and you put the AC on in the summer. The whole house is breathing. So those spores are just essentially circulating throughout everywhere.
Yeah. And so are those tests of air quality effective?
Yes and no. One of the best tests you can do at home is called the ERMI test, ERMI, and they send you like a Swiffer, and you literally collect dust from your house, and it'll pick up the mold spores, the toxins, and, just fragments of the mold. And it gives you a good picture of, do we have an issue or not? It's not the best test. And then normal inspectors that are building inspectors, or someone who works with the insurance company, which is usually who they send out, they do kind of an air test in the middle of the home, and that's it. Yeah. And they'll do an air test outside, and they're like, oh, look at that. Outside's more than inside, we're okay. But if you really suspect mold, and your ERMI is really positive, or you have a lot of symptoms, or you have a kid that's really sick, getting somebody in that's, with building specialist, our guys spent about 8 hours, testing the entire house. And it was really invasive. Yeah. They put holes in a couple walls where they thought there was damage. They took air samples all over the place. They'll find it. But they're working for people who are sick. So it's a very different approach. It's a different thought process, costs a little bit more. But most of the time they'll be able to find it if it's there. The scary thing is there's quite a few adult clients that I have that grew up in a moldy home, or they went to college and they had a moldy dorm, and they're still struggling, and they obviously live in a clean house now, is because they were colonized. So it's really hard to know. Kids, usually it's the house they were born in, right? But for us adults, it's, looking back, we're questioning, I did live in a really moldy house, I wonder if my immune system is really struggling with this too,
That's so interesting. Of course, I need to go run out and get everything tested. And so you were working with me while you were going through all of this and treating it, and moved out of your home and all that stuff. Can you just talk? I'm sure I don't know if it looks differently for everyone. And by the way, my new functional medicine expert, Becca Kyle, she always, like, from my client's intake form, right? They do this intake form for her. I don't read all of them, but a lot of them, and she will pick up mold, she suspects mold, and then she will have them do, I think it's that ERMI test, because I just know that they wipe things down in their home. And then when you said mycotoxins or mycotoxins, I've heard of that a lot. And whenever you kind of have certain symptoms and expect it, it comes back positive, right? And so then I look at their kind of treatment plan, and it's a few months. And of course, anybody on fertility does not want to see that you need to spend a few months treating this. But I can't tell you how important it is. And we're going to talk about egg retrieval or, growing eggs versus a transfer. But can you talk a little bit about how to treat it? And I know that's a very vague question because of what I've seen in terms of, protocols to treat it. But in general,
it's tricky. There's two schools of thought. There's obviously, the Andrew Campbell, more conventional way of treating, which is essentially taking a big antifungal, something like itraconazole, for 6 months. It's a very, very big drug. And he, being on the conventional side, doesn't understand supplements very well. So he'll add a vitamin D and a fish oil, and he'll think he's really smart on that front. He's brilliant, but doesn't understand this side. And then there's the Neil Nathan side, who's more on binders, supporting detox, healing the gut.
I hear that more.
And
I hear that more with Becca.
He also treats with itraconazole near the end, so it's not an only conventional side, but it's a very, very different approach. Each person thinks the other person's crazy and not doing it right. And then there's Richie Shoemaker, who's been around forever. He was the one who essentially is the grandfather of mold and treating it in this way. He is still around, and he works with the Dr. Andrew Heyman, sorry, who also treats. And he treats, online. He's a big physician, I think, on the East Coast. But a lot of it is really supporting your detox capabilities. Is the number one is getting out of the moldy environments. If you're in a moldy environment, you're not going to heal. Detoxing the system. Binders will kind of bind to the mold so that you can excrete them a little bit better. It does pull them, doing things like phosphatidylcholine to get the bile and then the liver really pulling those toxins, because it essentially goes that way. So it's just a lot. It's tricky for some. If the kids are really sick or the adults are really sick, it can take a year to get someone out. Those are really sick people. But the average person that just has some exposure, the system is maybe a little bit colonized, it should be able to detox pretty quickly. But what we see with people who are exposed to mold, it causes such a mess in the gut, and it backs up the detox pathway so much that you'll start to see heavy metals rise. You'll start to see reactivation of viruses that were latent, like EBV or CMV and all these other things. And you'll see thyroid issues, and you'll see quite a few deficiencies because the gut's a mess. Your immune system's on overdrive, so you're utilizing too many nutrients. You aren't absorber assimilating enough to keep up. And we all know, with B12 and iron, magnesium, selenium, those are all really needed for fertility. And one little multi may not be enough if the gut is such a mess. So it's it's important just to really look into it when you're struggling with things, because it could be a root cause.
So if somebody is struggling with fertility, would you recommend everybody gets tested for mold, or are there certain symptoms that are very specific to mold where you would say you should look into this?
I'm biased because I want people to have healthy kids, and so it's nice to know, but it's a big no. So it's trying to navigate those waters. I like to do an organic acid test. An organic acid test really reveal how is the microbiome doing, what's the fungal load, how's detox going, and if that's a mess, I think looking further into mold would be appropriate. Also, if you're like, oh gosh, our house has tons of water damage, and during the rain last year, our ceiling was coming through, and someone came in and remediated, you'd be highly suspicious that they didn't do a proper job and check the house.
Okay, so you would start with that organic acid test. Is that a blood test?
It can be blood or urine, usually urine.
And now I know that a lot of my clients used to get these tests from you. Now they get them from Becca because you can send it to people's homes. If somebody's not working with me, how can they get these tests?
I believe there's some online that you could order them yourself, but usually you find a naturopath or a functional medicine physician in your area, and it's not an abnormal test to even ask for. And so,
Okay.
Getting it and, I think, even reading the book that Neil Nathan wrote called Toxic, if you have any question about mold at all, there's so much information in there, and you can learn quite a bit from it. He's lovely. And so it's a good read, especially if it's like, how do I navigate these waters now? Who am I going to go to? What do I do? It's all in there.
Okay. Okay. So start with those tests. And I remember you taught us that and I don't know if this is just in the States or not, but IFM.org, internationalfunctionalmedicine.org, you have told my clients if they need somebody in their area to go there because that means they were like certified a certain way.
Yeah, the Institute for Functional Medicine is out of Cleveland Clinic. It's a fabulous organization. So it's really highly accredited. So those who have gone through that program, they're NDs or DOs. So you have to be medical. I don't know if maybe naturopaths can. I have to double check that. But they'll give you a list of providers that are in your area that have been certified. So it's helpful just trying to find someone.
Yeah. What about like Canada, UK, other countries? Are they're not on there,
They may
right?
be, because there's quite a few that come from those countries to learn. So I would imagine, I'm not sure if it's on a database there, but you could check.
Okay. And so where are you? How many years has it been, and where are you with the mold process? So I guess to back up before that, so things were discovered with you as well. And so did you go through a whole detox?
I'm currently, for the year, all the kids and all of us started, some binders. I've always been a big supplement taker, so I'm supporting all my system. And my gut's always a mess on testing. And, I eat as clean as I think they can be. I do the serotypes, low inflammatory diet. I'm very, very picky with all that stuff. And it still wouldn't budge. So I actually started itraconazole. I'm doing, Andrew Campbell's protocol. I'll probably end up doing it for 6 months to really see if that works. And the reason being that I'm more on that front is my 8-year-old spent a year on the more natural approach and did great, but kind of hit a wall. The eczema was like here and there. Food allergies were still really strong. The histamine response was huge. The mast cell activation syndrome was still a huge thing. Started the itraconazole, 2 months in, eczema is completely gone. The histamine response is much, much lower. And so I think sometimes you actually do need to go in and take a pharmaceutical to get rid of the mold. I think it's one of those things really hard to get rid of all the way without some of the pharmaceutical drugs. And there are some great herbs that do the same thing. They're harder to take. They're harder to tolerate, but people do it all the time. Adults, I think, do better than kids with the herbs, because the herbs kill more than just the mold, right? So they kill some bacteria. So it's a lot of die-off and you get a lot of symptoms. So my kids never tolerated those, sadly.
And what is that pharmaceutical that you
It's
mentioned?
the itraconazole. And things, it's a big antifungal. Things like nystatin we do, and, fluconazole and diflucan, we start with those to get, if you think about mold, it's a yeast. And a lot of us have yeast, just generally speaking, especially because bulk sugar we eat. And the mold and the yeast start to play together. So we see a quite high number or amount of yeast in the gut and system because of the mold. So it kind of drives those two. So a lot of protocols will drive down the candida first with things like nystatin, or even, oregano and garlic. And there's other things that drive yeast down before going in and taking care of the mold with something like an itraconazole.
Okay. And I'm just taking notes. So it sounds like maybe do the organic acid test and then do a gut test. And would that be, is that how you recommend it?
I think gut test's good for everybody, right? Because it is, even if mold is not an issue, our gut health is so important for our hormones and how we detox toxins, to our immunity. I mean, fertility rides on our gut health pretty significantly. So getting a gut test is important. Gut test won't pick up mold. Unfortunately, it's not there yet. I'm hoping, soon. I'm sure there will be at some point. But it does pick up such an imbalance. And usually looking at all the tests together, you really could put a picture together. But for mold in general, the gut test, we know the gut's probably a disaster. So testing it is helpful, but not that helpful because you're going to go after it anyway.
Mm-hmm. And again, the gut test that I know you like, GI mapping, right? Things like that. And that's from who? Who does that GI mapping?
Well, there's Doctor's Data, who's got a really good one that's a little bit more expensive. GI Effects from Genova is fantastic. GI Map is good too. We run it because it's not as expensive as the others. It's validated. It's quite a good test. It's
so Doctor's Data, Genova, or GI Map. Those are the...
Yeah.
Okay. And again, you would have to go through, right, a functional medicine expert, maybe a naturopathic expert doctor for those. Okay. And yeah, this is fascinating. So can you figure out what environments / houses? I know you and I live by the ocean. Are those the type of environments or that tend to have mold, or like I grew up in the Midwest, very humid?
I think it's everywhere. They say 50% of buildings in the U.S. have mold.
Wow.
The theory of why are we getting so sick from it now? Have we always and no one paid attention, or we're just now figuring out, or is it's probably a little of that, but more the latter. I think we're just set up for failure, right? We have a lot of toxins in the environment. Our gut health is not great. Stress and everything else is much more. So our system is less resilient. The other theory is the use of 5G, Wi-Fi. Essentially, the EMF puts pressure on the mold. And when an organism has pressure, it starts to become more virulent. So, and grow faster. And they believe that something's taking over their space, right? So the thought is 5G might be crushing us. How we build now is with paper, right? And, so that's... Some of the newer homes actually get hit harder with mold than the older ones, just because how they're built. They're sealed so tight that no airflow, and we're using really cheap building material.
Yeah, my house that I'm renting by the beach is very old, and I freaked out that I thought we had mold because these, nothing in my house I own. I'm renting, so I don't want to spend money on it, though I do, but these blinds, they had black stuff behind it, and I just literally ripped out the blinds. And so I went to the amazing man who owns my house, and he was like, well, I'll check, he goes, but basically there's no insulation in these houses. They're so old that it's unlikely to have mold. I'm like, well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
But then he did only the air test, and it came back negative. But I know that, that I think I want to do the ERMI test. And then, of course, I'm due for all of my kind of functional medicine tests. So I'll have to get those done. Becca was telling me, you need a gut test, Tasha. You need another gut test. So, but it's the insulation it's the new
It's just the way, sadly, it's just the way we build. And mainly because there's no airflow.
Okay, now for fertility treatments, knowing, because you work with my client, nobody wants to take a break. Okay. So now I'm going to negotiate with you. Is this something, if somebody has mold toxicity, and I know that there's different ranges, so maybe it depends on the range, but if somebody has mold toxicity, should they wait to do an egg retrieval, or is it okay to do the egg retrieval, get the embryos on ice, do the treatment, and then do the transfer?
It's so tough to...
Or do they absolutely need to?
It's so tough to say.
Yeah.
I think mold treatment is a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm not sure putting things on hold is really necessary. Unless you are really sick, I think it's, take care of your health for sure, because, the rate in which it's going to work is probably lower, and it's enough emotional turmoil as is. But we know that, mold changes DNA. It reduces ovarian function. It really hits sperm hard. All toxins hit sperm really hard. So a lot of times it's, it hits us, but the fertility issues are on the guy because the sperm are just so fragile. And so even if you kind of know you have mold, you're working on getting in a clean environment, I think the best thing you can do is like dairy-free, gluten-free diet, 100%, because those drive so much inflammation in the gut. The gut's already messed up. Calming the gut down, pulling in as many fruits and vegetables and colorful polyphenols and antioxidants as you possibly can. I mean, we know that men who consume more antioxidants, their fertility raises like 50%. I mean, it's staggering. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic, but it's how many antioxidants are these guys eating, right? We don't know.
Well,
We think we eat more than we do, I believe, because when I really ask patients of mine, oh yeah, I eat fruit all the time. And it's like, well, okay, maybe once a week. Or how much citrus? I mean, I don't do that because I don't like to peel the oranges. And so we actually are eating as much as you think we are. So it's really looking at your plate and filling it full of colorful things. That's going to feed a really healthy microbiome, the fibers, the pre and postbiotics, even taking a good probiotic, just really focusing on gut health, removing all the processed, all the sugar, all the dairy and gluten, all the crap. That will essentially set your system up to be able to handle what's going on and hopefully bring down an inflammatory load so that you aren't having so much effect on the hormones and the egg quality and the sperm quality. I think it takes a while to get out of the environment, and it's important to do so because if you're pregnant, like I was, and you have a baby in a moldy home, it's not a great look. So it is still important to pay attention and just continue moving down that pathway every day of how can I, the self-love, the food, and get yourself in a good spot. In the meantime, looking for the mold, maybe getting some tests, just having an understanding, okay, this may be a factor. How am I going to address it? When you're pregnant, you don't want to obviously detox and things like that, but keeping a cleaner diet than you probably would have otherwise will be beneficial for you and baby. Getting out of that environment, getting out in the sun, doing all those things that we do, but we tend to lose track easily. You get pregnant, it's like, oh, that diet's out the window. Now I'm pregnant, I'm fine. Stay tuned so that you can really be more resilient during this whole process, right? Because I do think mold is a tricky one because it does take time, and time is not what everybody has, right?
Right. Okay. So what I'm hearing is if you're really sick, you should be putting fertility treatments on hold anyway and figuring out the why, and then, of course, working on it. For those of us who don't have these major symptoms of inflammation, eczema, migraines, brain fog, easily getting sick and colds and all this stuff, if that's not us, which honestly, that sounds like most of us, or really wonky hormones, really low testosterone, thyroid issue, again, sounds like most of us. But if that's not us, then just you can look into these things if you want, but go ahead with the fertility treatment, eating and being as anti-inflammatory as possible to just keep our gut strong, because our gut ultimately is the powerhouse for overall health and wellness. So when that's strong, everything else tends to just work better.
Yeah, and I guess one other thing is we know that mold really affects our mitochondria. And mitochondria is something that your team speaks of often because we need quite a bit of mitochondria for egg development and growing an embryo, so on and so forth. So if you know you have water damage in your home, or you do the test and you know you have mold, the key really is, diet, sleep, all of the good things, and mindset and all of that, which you guys do a great job of. But it's also really, really supporting mitochondrial health because they're likely lacking, and it's important, which is, the acetyl L-carnitine, CoQ10. There's a lot of things that really support mitochondrial health. MitoQ, MitoPure, all those, they're more expensive, but they're fancy, but they're all fantastic. So finding ways to support mitochondrial function is really important, and it will go a long way. So we're supplementing our way through it because our body's not, right? Or at least we're there. And so when we actually have a chance to to do it right. Hopefully you don't have to be on these things forever, but at least supporting yourself during the process.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I still choke down so many supplements a day.
Me too.
And I'm not trying to get pregnant. But it's like, I'm all about optimizing, right? But I'm overdue for a check-in. I'll have both Becca and you
Take a look. Awesome.
look at everything. Well, so anything else before you go about what you want to share about your experience with mold and your training, or anything else for the women that are trying to get or stay pregnant?
I think we said a lot. I think just having it in the back of your mind when you see friends, or you see friends' children, or anyone really struggling with things that just are somewhat abnormal, especially a child who's really sick, because they shouldn't be. I mean, they really, really shouldn't be. Like these things shouldn't be happening. And when you're seeing them, it usually is driven by something. Have them seek help and figure it out. That it's not the new normal, of having, special ed teachers that follow around in class because they can't be in class. And none of that stuff is okay. And, I feel bad for these poor kiddos. So it's, looking into, finding help for them. But also if your friend's really struggling and it's like, hey, take a look at this. This is interesting. And there's a lot of information. Like Neil Nathan, like I said, but there's Jill Carnahan out of Boulder. She's a good functional medicine doctor. She's got a fabulous podcast. I work alongside Pejman Katarai at Holistic Kids in Santa Monica up here. He's one of the leaders in the pediatric side. And you'll hear him on podcasts, but he's got a really good Instagram all about mold and its effects. Her stuff is there. Jill Krista's another one. So it's, we can navigate ourselves through it online of listening to a podcast here and there or something. And it's like, okay, that rings true to me. Maybe it is me. I'm going to go down this path. Or maybe it's my friend Jill. She's really struggling. Maybe I'll send her this podcast, because it's something that's not looked at very often, and definitely not when you see a fertility specialist. They're not going to go into any of this stuff.
Right. Okay. And we do the organic acid tests, and all of us should be doing the gut test. Got it. All right. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for this education. And yeah, people can, you're just training still, right?
No, I have a practice with
so you're in that Santa Monica practice?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So tell me again, what is the practice called?
It's holistickids.com. You can see it's in Santa Monica, and there's also Holistic Minds, which is kind of an AI platform for more across the country and not the world, where other practitioners kind of hone in on more on the kid side with the ADHD, autism, and more severe. Most of it's more related.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for this. I have been wanting to share this information with everybody for so long. And you were just the perfect person to do this with.
It was fun. I wish I saw more on the adult side in this practice, but I don't. But you can always reach out, and I can help you find somebody on the adult side that can help.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's awesome.
Well, that was our uncovering for the day. If you have a feeling that your IVF protocols or strategies could use a second opinion, start with our website, tashablasi.com, for resources and even a free discovery call where we can learn about your specific IVF needs and see how we can help.